after a fair bit of effort, I've managed to get that all stripped, cleaned, rust removed, put the edges back on. So I've welded those edges on now, and I'm just going to get it into some epoxy to seal it up. That'll have both sides sealed then, so that it's ready when I get the drip gales to put it back on. So it's looking pretty good. You gotta love that look of the dioxidine with the blue. So I'm going to throw it in the booth now and get a couple of coats on it. Righto, so back on the van. It's been about, I don't know, 10 weeks because we had BOSSXC here and a heap of work to do on that and get it ready for MotorX. And I come home with a bit of a flu, so I've been getting over that, getting the yard all organised. So the plan the next few days, Darren's here for a couple of days. I'm going to work with him to try and get all these gutters back on. So that's the factory rear panel that we cleaned up and put some POR 15 on it. And then these are the new gutters here that Jamie's made for us. He's done a nice job on that. So we'll get those ready and primed on the inside as well. And I want to do that so I can sit the roof on, get all make sure we've got all our edges right. And I was planning on maybe doing a bit of shrinking on these side panels, but I've opted against that because there's a lot of movement in the side panels until the roof goes on. So at the moment, these are quite flimsy still. So the plan now is to get the roof structure on, and then we'll work out what we're going to do with the side panels. So because that's the original panel, we're just lining up the spot welds. So it's painted on the inside. Once we get it all welded in and ground up, we'll obviously do the outside. So that'll go back on exactly where it was, and then we'll be able to put the new piece on the top. Righto, so you've got that all plug welded back on. And you'll jump on that now with a 40 grit flapper disc, flatten those up, and it'll look like we've never been there. Righto, so he's got that ready to go now. We've just got some weld through primer on that back edge. And all under here now is all ground up. Once we get it all welded in, we'll clean that up, put some epoxy on it. And then the new gutter, we just had to put a couple of little notches in the corner here just to get it to fit back up underneath. And that'll go in now. And it's got the weld through on the side we can't get to. And we'll just get the spot welder out and spot weld that on. If you don't have a spot welder, you could effectively plug weld it. So you could plug weld it up through the bottom here. But the fact that we've got a spot welder, we'll be able to put it on with that, make it look nice and factory. So while he's been working at the back there, I've just been fiddling around here. So I've just been welding up the holes. So this car had some wheel arch mouldings on it, which I'm not going to run. And then along here, this panel here, the quarter panel, was sitting out way past the sill panel. And what I've done is, you can see I can move that now. This was sitting way out. It was probably 3-4 mil outside of this. So I've just run a blade, 1 mil blade up under that return edge there and then up this side. And as soon as I've done that, it's actually released and gone back in. So it's now sitting where I think it should be. Nice and even. It's a little bit out here still. So I'm just going to put some tacks. Now the reason I've done that, you can see the size of the gap from the factory. And they normally just fill that up with sealant. So I'm going to run in along there with the MIG, nice and slowly. Use some compressed air as well. And then I'll grind a nice line back in there, so it'll look factory, but rather than having sealer, it'll actually be fully welded and that'll minimise the rust for later on. Righto, ready to rock and roll with the spot welder. So it's all clamped on. So I find it interesting that none of this back structure here is actually welded to this. It all slips underneath. And then when the roof comes down here, it's got the back edge runs along this edge, so then we'll spot weld that. So at the factory that probably all gets spot welded in the one go, but we'll be doing it separate. Our little machine doesn't have enough power for that, plus we don't know where it's got to go yet. Righto, so you can see here now I've just ground the top off of these with a normal grinder, and then I've gone to the little Merker machine with some 36 grit on it, just to get into that corner and make a nice little square edge. So that's that one. And then I've gone to a normal 40 grit in a large one like this to run along and get myself that nice groove. So it's very factory looking, but it'll be fully welded rather than having the seam sealer in it. Righto, so that's all nicely on now and been cleaned up a bit under here as well, so you can see there the spot welds. Now when this roof goes on, we'll re-spot over the top of those, so because that's already joined together, when we put the roof skin in here, we'll be able to spot through the same area to make sure that we get good contact. So that's come up really nice. So the next stage will be to sit the roof on and work out what we're going to do around here, and then sit our drip gutters on down the sides and work out exactly where they're going to go so that we can weld those on, and then we're getting close. Righto, so we've got the roof back on it. Now it's sitting in the gutter really nice, and we've just had to make a little bit of adjustment on the other side. There was a bit of rust through here, so we've added some bits on and stuff, so really happy the way it's sitting. So this will come down on, the gutter fits between here and here, so we're just going to pull this back off now and start working out where the gutters are going to go. This looks really scary, how much movement's in that, but it pulls down quite easily. So I've deliberately made this a bit wider, so when I welded it on, I didn't get a lot of movement. So what we're going to do now, we've worked out that needs to be 10 mil wide, so we're going to trim that off, and it all pulls down to where it's got to go. So it fits here. We've done some repairs through here with rust as well. And then on the front, everything's sitting back on the original spot weld. So front and back's good. Now I just got to work out where I'm going to put the gutters, weld the gutters onto the body, and then we can weld the roof onto the gutters. A few more parts going back on. So what the issue was this piece come out of here and it was all rusty, as you can see. So I made a piece to go in there. Darren made that up and welded that in, and these little brackets here are the brackets that hold on the hood lining. So I'm pretty sure I'm just going to maybe run a full hood lining, so I'm getting him to put those back in. So we've cleaned up the back surfaces, sprayed them, and then we're just spot welding those back on. If you're wondering about why none of this is bare metal, the reason for that is what you're looking at is brown paint, not rust. So I don't see the need to bare metal things if they've already got a coat of paint on them and they've been pretty good for 40 years. So I'll just film Darren when he does these last couple of spots. So that's the spot welder we use. making some pretty good progress. So we've had these made, and this is the first time I've fitted a set, so we've just been fiddling around with where it sits, and it's interesting with these cars, the shape of them sometimes that you don't realise. So Jamie's copied the ones we took off, and we made sure we straightened them up before we sent them down to him. But this has actually got quite a bit of a curve in it through here. And I found it interesting that when you put that on the panel, there's probably, at this point here, 15, 20 mil that it tips in from about this point. And the new gutter now does that. And when we put it on, we went, well, that doesn't quite look right, but it is right. So we've managed along this bottom edge now to be nice and even. And then I wasn't sure about this. When I had my original van, I always thought it'd be cool if that wasn't on there. And I couldn't sort of remember why, and I just went back and looked at a whole lot of photos that I had of panel vans that I've been collecting over the last 3 or 4 years. The XAXB drip gutter stopped here, it was just straight. And on a lot of them you can see where the water runs down, and I presume that must have been an issue because the factory on the XC added this part. So I've been looking at it thinking, oh, do I make it shorter, longer, go like the XAXB, and I've decided in my mind that I don't think it'll look right in my mind's eye if I change from the factory. So we've left it the same as the factory and maintain this even gap all the way along. So what we're going to do now is spot weld this one on, and we'll do a couple of plug welds as well. Something structural, I always like to have a couple of plugs in it just to be sure in my own mind that it's not going to come off. So we'll spot it all on, put a couple of plugs in it, and then the factory gutter is one piece, but it's a bit long to make for Jamie to make in one piece, so he's made it in two, and this back one curves in at the back as well. So we'll set that one up, cut it, and we'll just TIG weld it together on the car. So the next stage now, we'll get that one welded on and then start making the next one fit. While Darren's been doing all that structural stuff, I've been finding a few jobs to do, so I'm here to help and be involved in that, but at the same time keep myself busy. This is the factory join, and you can see on the other side where it's been lead filled. And for some reason they had a lot of lead in it, and they changed the shape of the body, and I quite like the way it looks without all that fill. So what I've done now is I've just made a bit of steel up for there. So I'm going to tack that in, and then I'll probably TIG weld that in. So I'm just going to weld both sides and top and bottom, and that'll just fill that up so that when I do my filler work I don't have that extra 5 or 10 mil of filler in there. And then on this other side I'll just wind it up. I had some footage there of welding up this bottom join. I've got it sort of 90% now, so I've been cleaning up all this bottom edge, and now I've welded this and ground it back. So I've still got the factory look, but I don't have to put the urethane in there to seal it up, because traditionally, I know my own van, when it was only a couple of years old, was already cracking and starting to rust through there. So I've fully welded it, and now I've sanded it up. I'm just trying to prep all of that, so I want to get all that in epoxy later in the week. Righto, so the moment of truth now. So that Darren's got those gutters on. So lots of spots and some plugs, as I said earlier. They look really good. It's quite interesting that the curves, there's a curve at the back here, back in towards the body, and then it's surprising how much the top curves into this front section as well. So got all those looking good, and then as I keep saying, I've made this quite wide along the top of this edge here, so we've measured that up and trimmed it back to 10 mil, and the reason for that is it'll sit in the gutter nice and square on the bottom, and then we'll spot weld that in as well. And once that's done, I'll put the epoxy on it, and then it'll get some sealer, probably some drip check or some urethane. If you're doing this sort of work, having the right tools makes all the difference. So what I'm using here now is a Merker. That's it up there in the box, so it's I can't even pronounce that, but the old aggro I call it. Really good bit of kit. I mean, it's got variable speed and it is a grinder. It goes very fast. You can crank it up. And it comes with Scotch-Brite, all your different grits and your sandpaper, and then it has flapper discs as well. So when you're in these small areas and you've got little ridges and things that you're trying to work with, it's very visible. You can see what you're doing. The fact that it's battery, it won't grab, because when it grabs it actually just locks out the battery. So really good tool. I'm loving using it and it'd be worth having a look. Back in. Aye. Yep. I'll take a bit of pulling down there now without that big lip on it. It's not all the way back. That's sitting in pretty good. What I'm going to do now is, where this was lead filled before, I'm going to play around with that now and just try and make that a bit nicer. But we've got a little bit of pushing and shoving to do, but it's looking pretty good. Righto, so that's the end of a couple of good productive days. So we've got the gutters on, I've got the roof back on now, and we've got it to sit down nicely in the gutters everywhere. I've utilised where we drilled out the front, so I've put that back into the same position. And then we just had to tweak a few things, you know, make sure this was straight with the body, and then this is all still a little bit flexible. But we found it a little bit difficult to get the roof to sit down exactly where we wanted. And those bars that go underneath the skin, we actually released those again so that we could get it to sit down properly. Across the back, it's all looking good now. It's sitting in nice. Where the lead joins were, I'll probably weld those up and then put a bit of plate in there, similar to what I've done down here. I'm not looking for these to be perfect, just to take away some of that depth of the filler. So the plan now is I've got to get that skin back off, seal everything up, paint the underside of the roof, and I'll probably paint all those rails everywhere except where we're going to weld, and where we're going to spot weld it, I'll put the weld through primer. So a couple of good days work. Now it's a case of pulling it apart, getting some paint on it, and then when Darren's back on his next trip, which is some weeks away, we'll actually put the roof back on, straighten these up, and then we can start working our way forward. Well, I've been pushing pretty hard the last couple of days because I'm trying to get this whole section here ready to do deoxidine so I can put the epoxy on it. So I'm using the Deltron DP616 on this, and I like that because it's nice and light. It's not real heavy build, but I need to do it to seal it up because I'm going away for a couple of weeks to do some filming up at up in Queensland. So what I've been doing is, it had been deoxidine before, but it had some surface rust on it. So if you look over here, Louise, there's no end of tools here. So we've got 40 grit flappers, 60 grit, the little light ones. We've got one, I think what am I on there, 36, a couple of different Scotch-Brites, wire wheels, die grinders, a little pencil job, the deadly wire wheel, and the last one I've just been using now is just a strip disc. So it's a flexi strip, and I'm just working away to make sure I've got nice clean metal, and I can still see a couple of little bits and pieces, but the deoxidine will take off any surface rust that's left. And I've been seam welding all around here, up here, and I'm doing that because I like things clean, and this is my car, so I'll now run some filler across this face, and when you open the door up it's going to be nice and clean. I'm still going to keep this body joint because I don't want it to look like it's fully welded up, so I'll keep that line there. And then I mentioned earlier, I've welded this one up, filled up all the holes. We've trimmed this an equal distance all the way around. And then there was a few dents that I've had to address. There was obviously an old repair here. I've just spent probably half an hour knocking that up. It's close enough now. What I'll do is I'll get it in epoxy, and then that'll give me both sides from here down. I do plan to weld this one up, but I'm not going to weld that until I get all of this welded on, because I want to get the structure right. Then I'll weld this, then I'll straighten this one out. So I'll give this a quick clean up as well in a minute so that it doesn't rust anymore while I'm not working on it. So it's a never-ending story, and if you don't have time, this is a bit like if you're doing yours at home. You've got to do pieces at a time to seal it up so that the rust doesn't get in front of you all the time. Righto, so I'm in the booth. I've got this all cleaned up, scotch-brighted and sanded everywhere I need to be. So I'm not going to seal this up yet because I'm going to have to heat shrink that, I'm sure. But I've got everything else clean, welded. We've got the dioxidine ready to go now, so I'm going to do that so that I'm ready to put that DP616 epoxy urethane primer on, and that way it will be fine and won't gather any rust while I'm up at Cooley Rocks. Looks pretty good now. A couple of little pin dents and stuff that I missed, but we'll get those, I'm sure. So that's the dioxidine. So I've got a couple of hour window now just to clean up, prep all the areas that I've sanded down the primers and stuff, and get my gear on and get some product on it. Well, that's a wrap for now. Really happy the way that's all come out. So the next phase will be to get the all of those bits and pieces up there in some 2K of some sort. There'll be just some black, and then we'll get the roof welder back on. Once we've got that done, the next stage will be to start stripping the doors so that they can make sure they're all good to go, and just keep working our way forward. Oh, so obviously I've got to do them side windows, so I've left them, I haven't painted those today because I want to make sure if I've got to heat shrink those, I don't have to remove the paint again. So that's a bye-bye for now.